So we're happy to be here. This is it's our first actual Better Yourself 365 training, or as we'll be calling it, Better Yourself 365 conversations that we're having. We're going to do more of it, probably on a monthly basis, to bring up different themes, to help your relationship mostly.
Yeah.
Sometimes parenting as well. So we'll be starting those on a regular basis. So you want to say, honey, a little bit of
Yeah,
who we
sure.
are for those who don't know us?
And you had said it's our first training, but we've definitely done lots of other training together. Just this is
First
our first
live.
live Facebook
Yeah,
live.
first live training session.
Exactly.
Free session. Yeah.
Bunch of stuff. So so Tina and I are the co-founders of Better Yourself 365. We are a husband and wife team, and we've been married 17 years, and we have 2 teenage boys. So some of our conversations are going to be around relationships, and some of them are going to be around parenting, and some of them are going to be around well-being, because that's also a topic of specialty for both of us and near and dear to our hearts. So we're both mental health specialists, so we're therapists, and we have some of our own specializations, but we both use a couples therapy approach called EFT, emotionally focused therapy is what it's called. And Tina is very highly educated in this area. I have some training too, lots of courses. And Tina, though, is highly trained in EFT, so she teaches me a lot. And then I learn a lot through our relationship itself. But so on that note, we do try to walk the talk of the lessons that we give and the conversations that we have, and we get to practice in our own relationship. And that's very important to be able to know that this stuff actually works. The things that we're going to be talking about is based on experience and based on training.
Yeah.
And so, Better Yourself 365, really, we're a company that provides digital and live courses and products for couples. And we do for parents as well, but for right now, we're really focusing on the couples piece, and we're really hoping to empower couples to get that connection back that they felt maybe they lost or has slipped. And it's important that we are always ourselves paying attention to our own connection, and we know what couples can have, because we believe we have a pretty special connection.
And we had to work at it.
And that's the thing is, you're not born with a good relationship. You might be born with a connection that you have with the partner, but it takes time and it takes a lot of work in order to maintain that connection and to deepen that connection. But it's something you can learn, which is why we started our company in the first place, because if you can't learn it, then there's not much we can teach you about it. But that's certainly not the case, because the things that we talk about, you can learn.
And this is why we're doing this training today, because a lot of couples wait too long before they get help. And I don't know how many couples have come through my office and have said, gosh, why did we not do this years ago when we started to have the problems in the first place, right? Because it just gets more and more complex, more and more hurts, more and more. It just takes longer to then get out of it and learn what you need to learn and heal what needs to be healed. So this training today is basically to give you some insight into your relationship and see, what makes a relationship work, and what are the kinds of things that you may be seeing yourself in some of the things that we're saying today. And if so, if there's some things that you think that you need could benefit for some help with, then this is the kind of products that we will talk to you guys about at the end of how we can help you with that.
Yeah, but first we wanted to talk about, really, we've broken it down into 3 main questions. So how do problems get started in a relationship? And what are the things that you need to do to make that positive shift with your partner? And what are the 3 most common cycles, we'll call them, that get in the way of your connection with your partner? So those are going to be the 3 main questions. And then at the end, we'll talk about how we might be able to help you. So let's talk about the first question.
Oh, and we'll also have time, like at the end, if you guys have questions, we'll spend some time with questions through the chat box. So we might not be as good at seeing some of the comments coming through the chat as we go. We might miss some questions, but at the end, we'll certainly cover some questions that you have.
That's right. So when it comes to the first question, how do problems get started? Honey, how do problems get started in your mind?
In a relationship, yeah. It's easy to have problems starting a relationship because we love our partner. So when we love, we are at our most vulnerable, right? Because there's nobody that's more important than our partner. And we decided to share our lives with our partner. So they matter to us, and what they, how they treat us, how they need us is all very important to us. So, but we're very vulnerable when we love. Sometimes it doesn't take much in our relationship with our partners. We're way more sensitive with a relationship with our partners than we are with any other relationship at work or friends or family even. Our partner, we're very vulnerable. So there's three things that happens often that starts creating problems in the relationship. One is life stressors. So for example, when couples come into my office, I don't see any couples coming through my office that haven't had tough things to deal with, like life stressors that have external things that have just,
of course,
took a toll of them. And then all of a sudden what happens is that once you start having life stresses on your relationship, you start to have sometimes a hard time coping with that stress, right? And that starts to get overwhelming maybe for the person, or they start to feel down, or they start to panic. They're not sure how to manage things in their life anymore. And they start to not feel like they're struggling enough to keep afloat themselves, that all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, but gradually it starts to get harder and harder to pay attention to our partner. So our partner feels that, right? And so that's why it's so important to be, we talk about better yourself first in relationships, because if we are strong as individuals and we're getting help when we need help to cope with things, and we can learn how to turn to our partners in those moments in a way that our partner can respond to us and give us what we need, then there's not going to be so much problems in the relationship, even if we have life stressors. But at some point, sometimes that gets too difficult. And then there's a negative interaction that starts to happen with your partner. And we'll talk about those. There's 3 different types that come up more often in a couple. So problems in the relationship, I want people to understand that it doesn't start because you don't love each other. It's actually the opposite. It starts because you love each other, and because that person is so important to you that you start to feel very fragile. You start really feeling the times that they miss what you need, right? Because they maybe are not able to provide that for you in that moment. So that's why often you hear people of things were so great in the beginning, and then we had kids and things start to change. So kids is a stressor. It's a life stressor, but it's a positive one in many ways. But it also has all of a sudden you have an additional person to deal with, and your whole dynamic changes. So when you start tagging on stressors like that, and we're talking about both positive and negative stressors. So a positive stressor could be a new job, for example, or having a child that you wanted to have. Those are positive stressors, but they're still stressors, and it may still change how you are as a son, how you cope, how you deal with things in your life, how you manage. And then you have all the negative stressors, right? And if I think of our relationship, for us, we had, quite a few years, probably 3 or 4 years that were really good. Maybe even started earlier on than that.
It started early because
on than that,
your dad passed away just before our first son was born.
Yeah.
And just think about those 2 things back to back.
And there was more than that, right? It's like, that's the thing. It could be more.
Of course, he was sick before that.
Yeah. So there's, stressors about, my dad dying. And then we had a premature baby of 2 months that we were in the hospital, that was in the hospital for 5 weeks before we brought him home. And then we had a miscarriage. And then I was on bed rest for another pregnancy for 2 months in the hospital. And it was just like,
things that can get in the way of you being able to be there for your partner the way you want to, and for your partner to be able to be there for you, because we're all individually coping with those stressors that And then this thing happens, and sometimes couples call it like a communication. We're not communicating. Well, part of it is communication, but it's much more complicated. If it was that simple, a lot of people would snap out of it pretty quick,
Oh,
because
yeah.
people can learn how to communicate, but there's a lot of dynamics involved with the interaction cycle that happens with a couple, especially when you add attachment needs in there. So
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about next, because all of a sudden, if you're going through some hard things, you also need more from your partner. But it might be hard for you to ask for your needs to be
mhm,
met if you haven't learned how to do that in your past.
yeah,
A lot of us haven't learned how to do that properly,
hmm,
right? So all of a sudden we become very sensitive to how our partner responds to us. And we're expecting our partner to be calm with us, to be, patient and attentive and engaged and receptive and present and all that, right? But they can't be that way 100% of the time. That's a false expectation.
hmm,
And especially when there's life stressors, then they need us to be that with them too. And that's where we start to miss each other. We start to have needs that our partner's not hearing. And it's okay if that happens once in a while. A relationship can survive that, right? But then when it starts to be the norm, then it starts to have even more of um, that panic in us. It starts to create what we call in couples therapy, in the emotionally focused therapy approach that we talked about earlier. We start to feel emotionally unsafe with our partner, and we start to not know, we start to not be ourselves anymore. We start to not engage with our partner the same way. We're protecting ourselves from being hurt, being disappointed. And then it creates a whole different dynamic that we'll talk about in the next question. Is the third question is those three cycles that it creates. But really, what we're all looking for in our partner is to know that they they see us, they pay attention to us, and they can be there for us when we need them, right? So that's what we need the most from our partner, and we call these attachment needs. We have these in our as a child from our parents.
hmm,
Plus, for our parents, we also have the the protection aspect of meeting our needs and taking care of us in that way too, which we don't have as a couple when you're adults. But you still have the same needs where you need to know that, can I count on you? Like the things that we need from each other is,
hmm,
can I count on you? Are you there for me? Do I matter to you?
hmm,
And even do you need me? Right. So when you start, if you hear yourself asking yourself these questions often with your partner, that could be a sign that you're starting to feel like there's some of that disconnect, that emotional disconnect that's happening. And that, if it's not tended to, can just lead further to a further disconnect, because the cycle doesn't just change on its own. You need to really implement something concrete things for it to shift, which is what we're going to cover after.
hmm,
Um, but think about, fights that you have. So if you're thinking of any fights that you might have with your partner, um, odds are, if you look at what's underneath the surface of that topic that you thought about, whether you thought about, the kids or your in-laws or work or sex or whatever it is that you're fighting about, if you really break it down to what's underneath that, it's one of these attachment needs not being met. Pretty much can guarantee you at almost 100% that it's around, I'm not important to you, I don't matter to you, you're not there for me, I can't count on you, or I don't feel needed, right? A lot of times the partner will say, I hear people say, why am I even here? Like,
hmm,
all you do is criticize me. So why did you even choose me? Like, I can get to that place, right? The more you get caught in these fights. And some couples will say, well, we don't really fight. Well, that doesn't mean that you don't feel disengaged in the relationship, right? If you don't fight because you repair from your fights, and you tend to not have a lot of triggers, you don't trigger each other a lot, then that's different.
hmm,
But if you don't fight because you're just kind of going off quietly but disappointed, and you're not saying anything about it, and you just kind of push that under the rug and say, okay, well, it's not important, I don't need to address that,
Mhm.
then that creates another cycle that we'll talk about in a minute.
Yeah, avoiding conflict is a common thing
Yeah.
at some points in the marriage, in the relationship.
Absolutely. People are afraid of conflict, and if that's your experience from the past,
Yeah,
you're going to be even more afraid.
yeah, and some people are really not afraid of conflict, so they'll jump in and want it because for them it's a sign that they're at least engaged in the relationship in some
Mhm.
manner. Because sometimes you can imagine if you're a partner and you're looking for a sign from your partner that you matter and they're not engaged with you, you might have to ask for it in a way that is not positive, so, and that's something we're going to talk about later as one of the ways, the cycles that happens.
You try to get attention anyway, right?
Yeah,
Like a
try and
child
get
does. We
attention.
do that too as adults.
Yeah, not a tantrum because that's not the right word,
No, we
but
don't.
it is something where you're trying to get the other person to notice you. Yeah.
So another question for you then, if we're looking at the second thing we said we'd address today, what would you say are the three things needed to make, like the three most important things needed to make a shift in a relationship when a couple starts to feel
Mhm.
like some of that emotional
So kind of stuck
disconnection?
or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So first of all, Tina was talking about attachment. So attachment is that bond that you feel. So you have an emotional bond with your partner, and just understanding that you do have emotional bond and you do have needs,
Yeah.
that your partner needs, that you need from your partner. So you'll have, you want to connect with them, so you're going to ask them for that. It's okay to have that. Having needs and being needy are two different things.
Mhm.
Being needy is such a terrible term anyway, just because it's really a term meant to shut you down from asking for anything. So, but we're talking about needs that every person on earth has, and it's related to making us feel human,
Making us feel safe, making
safe,
us feel
seen,
seen
yeah,
and
soothed.
soothed.
Yeah,
Those
so
are the
those,
three S's.
yeah, so think about things that make you feel safe, emotionally safe, physically safe when you're young,
Well,
but
as adults.
obviously if it's a physical fight, but in terms of a marriage that doesn't have that kind of violence attached, I have emotional needs that I have to be okay with having those needs and asking Tina to meet them.
Mhm.
So, but I have to do it in a healthy way, of course. And then I have to accept my role as helping Tina meet her needs too. And she's going to ask of me that. So we have that understanding that it's okay to have these needs. These are actually makes me happy, makes me safe, makes me feel seen, and she can soothe me if I'm dysregulated or if I'm not good. So
Yeah.
so that's one, you accept your needs. Second of all, we accept that if our needs don't get met, okay, something can happen where, let's say we get into an argument or a disagreement over something. There we both need to recognize the part that we play in the dynamic that's going on, because you can't go and help your relationship by saying, and you need to do all the changes because everything's great on my side. So we need to own our move, we need to own our part, and that's it's a critical piece, because once you both accept that you both need to own it, now we're on even playing ground.
Yeah.
And now there's an opportunity for us to get this negative cycle under control, and we are going to move on to what that means. So once we accept that we have needs, and then accept that we aren't able to meet our partner's needs and we have a role to play in that, okay, that's the second one. Then the third one is, and actually this one pertains to me particularly, it's that showing vulnerability is really important in a relationship. And when it comes to our marriage, Tina is much more likely to show vulnerability than me. It's something that it seems innate with her, although sometimes I'm sure that she's actually pushing herself to do it too, just like everybody else. For me, it's very challenging, and for probably a lot of men, and I'm stereotyping and generalizing, but for a lot of men, we kind of get that message that being vulnerable is not safe, so vulnerability is not safe. So interestingly, I'm a therapist, so I work with people daily on watching them be vulnerable and being present with them. But what I'm talking about is your own stuff, vulnerability, that kind of thing, allowing yourself to go into your own emotional world and then sharing that with your partner. So there are some emotions that seem to be accepted in society. You could feel joy, that's great. There's probably not a lot of vulnerability to feel joy unless you live in a house where joy is not allowed. Anger seems to be a pretty popular one. We can flip our lid and people say, well, everybody gets angry. But what we're talking about are the softer, the emotions that might be like more sad or anxious or shame or guilt or even fear. Well, yeah, exactly. And we're talking about these kinds of emotional connections that if you allow yourself to get vulnerable, we are always surprised by how deepening that is for your relationship. So when actually at a time when you think, oh, vulnerability makes me nervous, actually, if you were to take the risk and be vulnerable with your partner, it deepens your relationship, which actually you might think it's the opposite. It will be the opposite. It's a dangerous thing to do. It actually helps it. It creates compassion, it creates understanding from your partner. So those are the three. So you have attachment needs, you have a move that you need to accept and identify what that is in the relationship. And then we need to work on taking emotional risks and being vulnerable with our partner. And the last bullet, number 3, actually, I just wrote a blog entry on our website. If you're going to blogs, it actually talks about this very point.
Yeah, and our blog is there, and it's nice for men, especially, to see another men's perspective on how to re-engage emotionally, because it is not easy to do. And this, when you're talking about this question, and you see your like you explained the 3 aspects, it makes me think, that's just clear why it's in 2 people are needed to make changes in the relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
That if only one person tries to make these changes, it may make some small shifts for a little while, but it likely won't be sustained, because your partner also has to recognize their own moves. They also have to acknowledge their own needs. They have to show their vulnerability as well, right? So if it's just one-sided that does that, then you're not going to get out of the cycles that we'll be talking about next as fast and as effectively, and you're not going to get that deeper level of connection in your relationship in the same way.
Yeah.
Right. So this is why it's important to have both people.
So we talked about the first question, how do you get stuck? The second one, what are the 3 things you need to do to create a positive shift? The third one is we've been talking about cycles, negative interaction cycles. And so there's really 3 of them. There's one, typically couples have all 3, but there's a more dominant cycle. Okay, so the 3 ones, I'm going to kind of briefly go over them, and Tina's going to go into more detail about those
ones.
Just
have a conversation on each.
I'll just kind of talk about each. So the first one we'll call attack. Attack is when people are, you start off with one person maybe getting frustrated or something, and then there's an accusation and some blaming made, and the other person receives that blame, and they have a decision. Am I going to back off? Am I going to go back in? What am I going to do? So in the attack, you can imagine they're going to go back in, and they're going to go on their own attack. And now we've got a fight going on, and both people are trying to win it, and nobody's listening to each other.
There's no winners in the end.
No winners in the end. And we're not talking about physical attacks. We're talking about verbal attacks and getting personal with your partner and accusing them of things and blaming them for the problem. And off we go. And before you know it, the content of that conversation has gone. And now it's emotional. It's really about winning the fight, no matter what. So, and
I should say before I continue too, that the 3 cycles that Michael is naming here, and the words that are used, these come from the emotionally focused therapy. Those are the words that are used in that, and that's been developed by Sue Johnson. So we're not just kind of pulling this out of our hat and saying this is like based on an approach to couples therapy that's been researched for over 20 years. So
so they've been identified as the 3 patterns that a lot of couples can identify with. The second one is probably the most common cycle that you'll see in relationships.
Absolutely.
And there's a couple different names. One is called pursue withdraw. And the other word that you can use for the same cycle is called demand defend. So you essentially have one partner who's looking for connection, but in a kind of a negative way. So they're like picking, nagging, controlling, complaining about the other partner not being enough, doing enough, whatever it is that they want from their partner. And the partner is backing up and needing to defend their position. So they're either going to avoid the fight, they're going to defend themselves in the fight, or they're going to close themselves off from that complaint or criticism and judgment, and they will stonewall that conversation. So they will kind of go blank. Yeah. So it's this dynamic of one person chasing down for a connection. It doesn't look like a safe spot for the other person. So they start going backwards, and they're either going to get out of that situation, or they're going to defend it, or they're going to go blank.
And this is where people's past experiences growing up or in other adult relationships that were significant. This is where you learn how to reach for your needs. You learn how to ask for your needs. And if you haven't learned how to do that in a healthy way, or it wasn't safe to ask for your needs, this is why you're coming in sometimes with with force or with criticism, or kind of passively aggressive, asking for your needs to be met, because you're not, maybe you're not accepting, like we said earlier, not accepting that you do have needs. So you feel bad about asking for that, or am I asking too much, or is this not normal, or am I being too needy? And so you're going in ways that are not clear to your partner, and they will only hear some message that they're not doing it right, or that you're not happy, and they'll see potential conflict, and that's when they go into defend or stonewall or avoidance.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But this all comes back to our experience growing up, and the way we're triggered in those moments when our attachment needs are not being met.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and it could have come from a previous relationship where the dynamic was like that, and so one person's natural reaction is to back off because they want to avoid that conflict because they knew where it led, kind of thing. So they have this defense strategy. So that's called pursue withdraw. Pursue is a person's pursuing the connection, and the other person's withdrawing backwards. So the third type of negative cycle is actually called withdraw. And this is oftentimes where that pursuer person, they start to get tired of reaching. And because they've tried everything in their bag of tricks to try to get their partner kind of re-engaged and connected. So they're criticizing, they're controlling, they're trying to be nice, they're complaining, and eventually it's like, okay, nothing's working. Why am I bothering to do this? So they get tired. So they withdraw. Now remember, the other person generally was already withdrawn because they weren't they weren't fighting for that relationship the same way that other person was, that their partner was. So now you have a withdraw situation here, where the person that was pursuing before, that was kind of reaching and doing a lot of the work, now is getting tired of backing off, and now we have both people backed off. So now a situation is, what's going to happen next? Is that old withdrawer going to step up and re-engage and get that other person back on track? So this is a dynamic that happens. So there's attack, both people trying to win the fight. There's pursue withdraw, one person reaching, trying to get the other person engaged. The other person can't do it, so they're starting to withdraw. Then the third type is the tired pursuer withdraws, and now you have both people withdrawn, called withdraw.
Right, and that last one is often, unfortunately, when people come in, when I say, they wait too long, is when things have gotten to that place over time where the pursuer has burned out, and now it's withdraw. And depending on how far, how disconnected that pursuer is now, like how far they've just kind of given up, they might already be too far out the door to really be able to re-engage in the relationship and feel like, okay, I'm taking this risk again, putting myself out there to try again after I feel like I've tried so many times. So it's important, if you are in a withdrawal relationship, or you're feeling like you might be, remember that if you've tried all these times before, And my hat to you, right? Because it is hard to put yourself out there and to be disappointed over and over.
Mhm.
But if you've only tried to do this on your own and you've never really had proper support in that, then of course it's going to be very discouraging to try again. But if you're coming in with a different way, if you're coming in with support and emotionally focused therapy programs like the ones we're offering, emotional focused therapists, there's some all over the world, they really can help you do it differently. And this is what the research shows, is this approach really is the most effective for couples, right?
Mhm.
If you've tried some couple therapy before and you weren't satisfied, maybe it wasn't the right approach, right? So if you still have it a little bit in you, enough to say, okay, this is my last shot, then give that a shot, right? I would suggest that you have confidence in that approach, in those programs that have that kind of approach, because it often is the last draw for people, right?
Mhm.
The last attempt.
So as you heard those three, give it some thought of where you and your partner might be. You know, which might
Mhm.
be the more dominant cycle for you. So as Tina's going to kind of go into a little more detail about each one, try to consider which one are we. You know,
Yeah.
because it's very helpful to know what the pattern is and what your role in that pattern is, and that's kind of the point of
Mhm.
this conversation we're having
Yeah.
in the first place.
So let's talk about the attack a little bit, honey.
Let's do that.
So the attack can look, it's probably the one that looks the most kind of,
Escalated.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And in session, I have to kind of keep, okay, let's slow this down. Let's slow this
Yeah,
down.
because definitely you can get into attack in the
Yeah.
middle of a marriage counseling session.
Oh,
You
for
can
sure.
have the couple get activated in their cycle, and
Yeah, and it's mostly with people that have a lot of hurts from the relationship,
unresolved.
hurts. So there's like built up resentment,
Hmm.
and that also may be people that have had past in another adult relationship, romantic relationship, or past in their childhood upbringing, where it wasn't safe to be vulnerable, to show any kind of emotion, to show any kind of need, that they were dismissed a lot. They were, they just got the message over and over that they're not important, and um, they're not good enough. So if that's kind of like the message you've had growing up, you may find yourself feeling very, very vulnerable as soon as, like, quickly you go to feeling like a sense of panic as soon as your partner does something for you that brings you back there to that feeling of,
Hmm.
I feel little, I feel not important, I feel um, I have no room, I'm dismissed. And you might be fed up with that as an adult now. And so your automatic response is to maybe not shut down anymore and fight back. And so as soon as you feel a sense of vulnerability, when your attack cycle, you want to hurt the other person. It's like you want to stab a knife in the other person and say, "You're not going to hurt me. I'm going to retake control of my emotions. I'm not going to let myself go to that vulnerable place. It's not safe. So I'm going to hurt you back." So when there's two people that have that kind of automatic response to feeling hurt, then we get into this attack. So it's
Hmm.
like, it's not me, I'm not the problem, you're the problem, and
Hmm.
it puts it back on the other person, right? And then, when I do this, then you react.
Yeah, and then of course I feel attacked and I feel hurt, and I have a decision to make. Am I going to back off on this one?
But there's no decision in attack. It's
Well,
like
you
automatic,
flip
right?
your lid,
Yeah.
but there is a sometimes where, like, let's say it happens with us, okay? So let's say Tina feels hurt, vulnerable, and she says something that I could either tune out from, or I could flip my lid, and I'm not conscious of what's going on. But if I flip my lid, and now I'm in, and we're going to do attack.
Yeah, and that's why I say an attack is often people who will have that very high level of sensitivity to triggers from feeling any kind of letdown or abandonment or rejection from their partner because they felt that so often. So that's why the lid is flipped really quickly. So there's not a lot of that decision making slowing down, right? And that cycle cannot last for very long. A lot of people who maybe do attack don't always do attack because it's not sustainable in the relationship. It's too hurtful the way it escalates. It can escalate to really nasty words, even physical violence sometimes. And also, if it leads to contempt, which often can lead to that, contempt is like the number one predictor of divorce is when cycles get to contempt. So it's really unsafe. It gets unsafe, right? So at some point, one person who's maybe you're in attack, at one point, a person just kind of gives up and doesn't want to do it anymore. It's too hard. And that's when they come into a pursue withdraw cycle more. So the pursue withdraw cycle, so that's our cycle. And that's what most of us, a lot more common in couples. So when we fight, it might look more like a pursue withdraw.
Yeah,
right?
Sometimes it's attack, but generally I'm the withdrawer and Tina's the pursuer. So and that's not always the predictor of this pursue withdraw cycle, but in this case, I'm often the one that's not fighting and kind of seeking and that kind of way in an overt manner. And sometimes I am. But that's the thing about the cycle is you never know where you're going to be. Yeah. But it's definitely our most common one.
Yeah, and when we were talking about earlier, when those couple years where it was really bad, our cycle was getting more often. We would fight more often. We wouldn't repair as often from a fight, because we were both in that place where there's so many life stressors that we were missing each other more, missing our needs, not being able to be there for each other more. So now, when we say we're in a pursue withdraw cycle now, it doesn't mean that we're caught in a bad place in our cycle, but our moves look like I'm the pursuer and he's the withdrawer, because that's still our natural way of dealing with feeling upset or disappointed or disconnected with our partner, right? So in the pursue withdraw, it means that the pursuer, whenever they have a whiff of any kind of sign of feeling disconnected, feeling like not paid attention to, like the partner doesn't seem to, we don't feel like we matter, our needs are not being heard, they're not being addressed. We start to feel disconnected, like we're not talking a lot, or we're not spending a lot of time together.
And pursuers really notice that.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's how you know you're a pursuer.
Yeah, and as a withdrawer, I don't notice the disconnection as much as she does. So if I'm not noticing it, I'm not pursuing it.
And that took a while for me to understand that, right? That you can feel that enough. It's almost like for pursuers, it doesn't make sense. How can you not feel we're disconnected? It's like, doesn't make sense.
Well, you can notice, and I'm generalizing, but a lot of guys, it's not like, oh, I need to talk to Tina about our relationship tonight. That's just not something I'll go out with my friends for a beer and go, yeah, I'm just feeling Tina and I need to definitely talk about our relationship 2 or 3 times a week. Like, it's really important because I want to we just don't talk like that. And I don't think like that. However, you can learn to be more of a pursuer, even if you're a withdrawer. So I can sense the disconnect more, but Tina's just Tina just naturally senses disconnect and wants to bridge the gap. So she senses a gap. So she feels disconnected and she tries to bridge the gap.
And now I know how to reach for you in a way, in those times when I'm feeling disconnected, in a way that you hear me, because I'm not coming in as negatively as I was before. But if you're caught in this pursue withdraw cycle, you haven't learned yet how to, in a very healthy, balanced way, ask for your needs to be met when you're feeling disconnected, or to say to somebody, hey, that really hurt my feeling when you said that, right? Can we talk about that afterwards, right? When we're not in the middle of the fight or whatever. So usually if you can't do that, then it comes out negative. It comes out as, like we said earlier, it could be nagging, like, what did you not, how come you're so late? So again, tonight you're so late from work, like we're not important, or I'm starting to feel I don't know why I'm here. And you start to say things like that. Then your partner can't really hear what's the need that you have underneath that. They only hear the criticism and then they go into their own stuff, right? So then you go into like feeling like,
Yeah, well, feeling like, or I'm, anxious because I'm not sure even what her needs are, so I don't know how to meet them. So like I'm fumbling around. So
mhm,
now I'm in defense mode. Is
mhm,
okay, yeah, no, I did try to remember this and remember that, but it's an anxious state, right? So, but withdrawers, the thing about withdrawers is we don't always look like we're anxious,
yeah,
but under the surface we're anxious. So she comes in feeling disconnected. She reaches for me, and the cycle piece is if she reaches it in a way that causes me anxiety or in a negative way. But if she reaches in a compassionate way and I'm able to receive her without getting defensive, there's no cycle. She was
mhm.
just asking for her needs to be met, and I met them.
And that's how you create a new positive, healthy cycle,
Yeah,
right?
we're talking about what happens to couples when they don't, when it doesn't go that way, and they both have a role to play. And that's the thing about understanding your own moves. So the withdrawer, well, you talk like the withdrawer, and I'll talk like the pursuer. How does that go? Let's try it.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, the withdrawer often says, because I hear this all the time, I just never get it right. Can't please her, and it's in
That's the
a
withdrawer. That's my
that's
role you're talking.
oh, I thought that's what you asked me to
Oh
do.
no, sorry. You do the pursuer. You're a
Okay,
pursuer.
okay, sure, okay. So that's more what I'm not feeling that now, but
Oh, sorry.
when pursuers talk, there's often that feeling of it's such a disconnect. They feel so alone. I'm shut
Mhm.
out. It shuts me out. I feel so alone. It's like
Right.
I'm living by myself. My feelings don't matter. I'm just constantly dismissed. I get no response, and I'm just kind of like knocking on your
Yeah.
door saying, "Can you see me? Can you
Look at me.
can we do something?
Yes.
Like, can we spend time together? Can
Yeah.
and no response, right? No response or defense response, which feels like a dismissal. And over time, it feels so much like they don't matter that they just feel like it can get into that withdrawal where they give up and they just feel like they're roommates, right? It
Yeah.
can
So
get
if
to that
Tina
point.
doesn't, if I'm not receiving Tina, she might have to turn up the volume a little bit. So now it not even literally turning up the volume, but sometimes literally turning up the volume, but like turning up the intensity of the request, which is, I need you right now. Can you see me? Can you give me that? And as a withdrawer, if I'm in a state that I understand beneath the surface of her words what she's actually asking for, I don't have to get into a withdrawn state. I can actually try to undercut and go, what's going on here,
Mhm.
and let's
Right.
talk about this. But if I'm not in that place, now I get into a defensive mode of you always blah blah blah, or I never can do it right, or what's the point of me even trying? Because every time I try to do that, blah 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 blah. Or here's some beautiful tricks, and if you're a withdrawer out there, you'll smile at this because sometimes a great trick to not solve this issue and to not listen to her is to tell a joke at that time when she's coming in and she's asking for her needs to be met. We'll like make something funny about it, or we'll like play with it and you can just imagine what
Just
will
to try to
happen
turn it into a positive,
because
right?
I'm worried about the conflict.
They so
Yes,
feel so
anxious.
uncomfortable, right?
Yeah. So you get anxious. So you nervously like tell a joke. And that's the most terrible time for a joke. And so the pursuer just gets more ticked off. And now they're going to like, oh, whatever they'll feel from me making a joke at that inappropriate time. Or I could just numb out. I could
Mhm.
just tune out, go quiet because there's nothing I can do. What's the point? That's a withdrawer standpoint in this cycle.
That's when they stonewall. That really gets pursuers going
Yes.
because it's such a kind of a
It's like
shut
a hand
out.
in your
Yeah.
face kind of, yeah.
Yeah. And on the outside, that's what pursuers have such a hard time understanding when withdrawers start like in our retreats and when we work with couples, like when they see what's actually happening to them
Mhm.
underneath that typical behavior that they're used to seeing, when they see that's actually so much anxiety there for the withdrawer,
A lot.
they're blown away because it doesn't look like that from the outside. They just look like they don't friggin' care.
Yeah,
Like
right.
it just looks like a blank slate. But it's because they're paralyzed and they numb out. They just don't know how to deal with
It's
it.
too dangerous
Yeah.
to go there emotionally.
It's a panic.
Yeah.
It's a panic on both sides for the pursuers, but the pursuers tend to go, they panic and they'll have more like a fight response, like fighting for connection. And a withdrawal will have more like a freeze or flee response where they
Mhm.
just need to get out of it
Yeah,
and not
that's right.
engage in it, right? So it's just a different way of dealing with the same sense of panic that you both have.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty much it
Yeah.
with pursue withdraw and withdrawal. Well, there's just this sense of it's really sad when you're getting to a point where you just feel a complete sense of helplessness,
Yeah.
right? You've tried everything and you've kind of accepted almost that you're just going to live parallel lives and you don't take risks to engage anymore. So you've tried that and it didn't work. So withdrawal can sometimes lead to affairs when one person turns to another one. An affair is more of a withdrawn stance because they just feel so rejected and just feel like they're not getting it, that they're never good enough for their partner. So somebody else gives them the right kind of attention and they might, engage in that. That could be a reason why that happens. There's the other reasons for affairs as well, but that can be definitely one that we see.
And it's like kind of, you could get into a state where for years you're living like roommates. You're not sleeping in the same bedroom, but you're co-parenting, but emotionally you're not intimate with one another. And so you're not taking care of each other's emotional needs. You're not reaching anymore. You're just kind of both gone to your corners.
Yeah.
And some couples can live years and years and years in that state. But in order to get out of that, somebody needs to get re-engaged into the relationship. And sometimes, like if you come into marriage counseling or relationship counseling, and both people are withdrawal, just the act of reaching for help together is a sense of kind of moving out of the withdrawal because you're trying to both engage in it. So
Absolutely. Yeah, that's where the shift's going to happen.
yeah. So one way to think about, the cycles that happens a lot, and Tina, you talk about this, you have a little saying about what the cycle is.
Yeah, we try to first start to work with couples and seeing the cycle they've created as the enemy. So you're not the enemy. You're not intentionally trying to hurt me. I'm not intentionally trying to hurt you. Underneath that cycle, there is a connection and love that's just kind of maybe eroded through the time if this cycle has been there for a while. But once you start to learn that the cycle is something external to you, you first need to recognize what the cycle is that you have and the roles that you have in each and how you get triggered there. And trigger is another big piece that we haven't talked about in here, but that we talk a lot about in our trainings for couples. You need to recognize what your triggers are and your partner needs to know they are so that you can come together, because that's part of what creates this cycle
and keeps it alive.
So if you see the cycle as the enemy, it becomes so less heavy, when you get caught in it. It's just like, okay, no, the cycle is here. Okay, so let's take a break here. Let's start over. And you start to do that in a different way. And that's what we teach people how to do that, because, we're at the part right now where we can tell you, these are the main pieces. If you tackle these pieces in your relationship, you're good to go. Like this is what you'll need to manage in your relationship forever, right? You just don't work on your relationship and then you start working on it. It's forever. So that's why we say better yourself 365. It's every day you work on your relationship, right?
But these basic core principles change the way that you relate with your partner on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And then once you get good at them, you're always using them. So even noticing that you have a cycle in the first place is such a big step, because now we know that it's this thing that happens to us. It's not her, and it's not just me. It's us and this thing, this cycle that happens to us. So, even that understanding can help get you out of this pattern and start you down the road to to having a relationship that's deeper and safer, and where you feel really connected to your partner. So what?
Yeah, so we've
what
been
do we
talking
do?
for about 50 minutes.
Yeah, we should probably.
So hopefully
Yes,
this was
yes.
helpful for you guys. And before you leave, we want to show you what, we just want to take a few minutes to show you how we help couples figure this out, right? Because it's one thing to understand it, but nothing changes until you take action. And we've developed our programs solely focused on the things that people have a hard time doing on their own.
Mhm.
Not just because it is just hard, because when you're in the cycle, it's hard to get out of it unless you have some help to see the big picture and some skills, and you can learn concrete skills on how you do need to show up for your partner differently, because you're just going to keep cycling into that place, right? So how we help with that? Well, there's different formats to help couples with that, but the main one that we offer the most support with, when we're actually there live with the couples to go in when they're doing some small some exercises on their own, is the retreats that we have for couples. So that's like a weekend retreat that we have, and we actually spend 16 hours with the couples. So it's a major
Not 16 hours straight, by the way. It's right from Friday to Sunday.
yeah.
Not 16 straight hours.
Friday night to Sunday, and in there we talk about, well, not just talk about it, that they do exercise, and they start recognizing, couples start to recognize their cycle and their triggers, which we haven't talked about today. They also take ownership of their own moves in the cycle, and they start to be a team. That's the first thing they come back as a team, being like, let's tackle this cycle together. So they learn how to control their cycle better, and better by preventing it from happening in the first place. But also, it's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
You're going to fight.
We still get into our cycle every once in a while.
Absolutely.
But much less. Much
less often, but
less
also
intense.
Less intense, right? And you can repair from it better. So that's another big piece that we haven't talked about today. But we talk extensively, and we actually have exercises where couples start to repair from past arguments they've had that they've not repaired from.
Yeah.
They learn that there's actually a process to repair properly, and that's what we teach you step by step. And withdrawers start to learn skills on how to re-engage in the relationship, and pursuer starts to learn the skills on how to better ask for their needs to be met in a way that their partner can hear. So in that, they're starting, even in the weekend, they start to heal some past wounds that they've had. And that's really quite powerful to see that happening in the retreat. Like, it's really the best part of the retreat when that starts to happen. And
you'd be amazed that you might think how vulnerable you are just being as part of a group in the retreat. But it's amazing how you are embraced by the other couples as well, because everybody's kind of we're all doing the same activities, and Tina and I have already done them too. So, and
we share our experiences.
Yeah, because we're not perfect, and we still have to work out ours, but there's a wrapping around of couples within that, and some of it is around that kind of the healing that everybody knows is going on, and people are kind of sharing what their experience has been, and it's so well received and respected, and so it just the whole kind of atmosphere of that weekend training is very therapeutic and pretty safe. And what's nice is that at the end, there's really a concrete plan for each couple. They have a roadmap now on what they need to continue doing moving forward, and a recommitment to prioritizing their relationship. Because that's often where couples get lost, is that at some point they stop prioritizing themselves. Yeah. They prioritize, the kids, their work, other things that come up, but they lose the commitment to prioritize their relationship. So that really shifts in the couple work. And we
the live part, is not for everybody. So we also have all of this in a package format now that we'll be offering, will be available in June. Probably we're hoping like June, we're aiming for June 7th maybe to have
Yeah,
that
pretty realistic.
digital version. But really we wanted to stress the weekend retreat because that's coming up the June 25th to the 27th. And the deadline to register is June 18th. So in the description of this actual training that you have now, there's actually a link to register to our weekend retreat, because there's only 3 weeks left to register. So if that's something that's interesting to you, we only accept 6 couples because we really want to give individual attention to each of the couples that are there, because if you're doing your exercises, this is done on Zoom. When you're doing your liberal exercise, you're on your own, so nobody hears you or sees you when
In a
you're there.
breakout room.
In a breakout room, right? But you can ask us to go help you. So Michael or I can go in and help you with your exercise. So we can help you go deeper. We can help you not get caught in your cycle as you're doing the exercise, right? So the link is there if you want to register, if you know somebody that might be interested for this training on. We really want to help you, and if you haven't seen any of our free products yet, visit our website, www.betteryourself365.com, and we actually have a free mini training that talks about other things that we haven't talked about today, basically the 10 big areas that every couples should have conversations about. And we lead you through some exercises that you can do in those 10 areas. We call it the 10 secrets to lasting love. So go get that if you haven't. And the minute you go on our website and you sign up for either that free mini training or a newsletter, we have your email and we can continue sending you, every week we send information on a tip or program or a blog that we've written or anything.
Mostly just really a lot of stories about things that we've learned.
Our own relationship, yeah. We share a lot. We're very transparent in
try to be
the sense
honest.
that every couple has to work at it. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time, hopefully.
Take care, folks. See you.
Bye-bye.